Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Sarah, and in today's video I'm going to be teaching you how to place eyes on your plushies and nail it every time. So I have two examples in today's video of different plushies and eye placement. The first one I have is this jellyfish here. Now I have this pattern here because it's a good example of pretty much any plushie where you can put the eyes on any point. That's not very specific on which side to place your safety eyes on, if that makes sense. But then I also have another pattern here. This is Bailee the unicorn, which I have a better example here. Her eyes are always placed in about the same place. I'm going to be using her as an example and then the jellyfish as an example. But we're going to start with the jellyfish as I feel this is more of a common pattern. It doesn't specify where to place the eyes and you're just kind of left guessing on which side you should place it on and where. I like to place my safety eyes. So this is the end of the round, beginning of the round. I like to place my safety eyes about opposite to it. Now, the reason I do this is because crochet has a seam. When you're working in the round, it works like a spiral, and where that round ends, so right here, it has almost like this overhang in a way. You know what? I'll just show you visually. So the safety eye would go here, 2 rounds from the bottom, and then if I went over to the other side and I did the same thing over here, then our safety eyes look like they're on 2 completely different levels and they look very uneven. If you use the tracing method, which I showed you in the sewing video, then you can see that the eyes aren't on the same level. That's because our rounds overlap here and start the spiral over again. And it can also look awkward if you're right next to your beginning / end of round. It can make the eyes look a little weird as well. So to completely avoid that, I go to the complete opposite side and place my safety eyes. So I'll start with this one here. It doesn't matter which one you place, but make sure you're in the correct rounds. I like to count basically whichever one is shorter. So instead of counting from the top down, I'm just counting from the bottom up, and I know I need 2 rounds between 1, 2, place the eyes between there. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the eye placement across, and I'm just going to put it into a stitch. I'm not going to count yet, but I'm going to place into that stitch and I'm going to look and see, do I like the size? Do I like the space between the eyes? And is there anything else I want to change? Maybe the eyes are a little too big or a little too small. So now would be the time for you to pull them out and fix whatever it is the issue. I think mine is spaced actually pretty much perfect. I've been doing this a long time, so I'm pretty good at eyeballing the eye placement. The best advice that I give everyone when they ask me questions is to experiment, to keep practicing, but also to experiment. Experiment with this eye placement until you're satisfied. And once you're satisfied, you can just go ahead and pop the washers in. I recommend using the washers that come with the safety eyes because I've heard of a lot of people gluing the eyes in after, which I can understand why, because it's easier to place. For example, if you're crocheting or sewing arms on and stuff, it's easier to place the eyes that way, but it's not as safe. So stick with your washers when you can, and honestly just keep practicing because sooner or later you'll figure out your eye placement. My first mini dolls were pretty cringe, so you know, just experiment, don't be afraid to make mistakes, and just go for it pretty much. But that is the eye placement. That's how I do it when I can place the eyes at any place on the body or whatever it is you're adding eyes to, the head. You add eyes to the head, duh. Now I'm going to show you how I place the eyes for a plushie where your eyes are supposed to go in a specific spot. And also I'm going to talk you through how I place eyes because I do shape the face after crocheting a plushie, crocheting this specific pattern that is. I'm going to show you how I place these eyes and then also think about the face shaping as I go. So here I have the head. I'm at the point where the pattern calls to add the eyes. I know from the pattern that I need to be between rounds 8 and 9. Now I normally just look at the plushie and can tell where those rounds are. Usually it'll be like between the last increase round and the first single crochet round, or for example the last 2 increase rounds. If you can't see those, that is perfectly fine and normal, honestly. So you can just go ahead and count your rounds out until you figure out which round you need to place your eyes on. So in the case of Bailee, I placed the eyes between the last increase round and the first single crochet round. I like to start with one side first and get that placement fairly where I want it to be before adding the second eye in. Here I place the eye, and now I'm actually going to sink the eye in a little bit, about how much I would if I was shaping the face when we're finished. And I look and I'm like, okay, I think I like this placement, but let's get the other eye in now and see where we're at. Now remember to use your tracing method to make sure the eyes are perfectly in line. If you do end up placing the eye in the wrong spot, you're not the only one. and I will show you a technique at the end of this video for how I remove the washers. It doesn't work with all washers. I placed the safety eyes, and you can see I'm sinking them in a little bit to see if I like the placement with the plushie, what it would look like when the plushie's finished. And I'm using the ears as a judge, so like this one is slightly below the ear, this one is slightly below the ear. This one I can see is a little further down, but if I move it up a stitch, then it's too far off on the other way. So I think this is where I'm going to place my eye, and I'm going to go ahead and trace one last time to make sure it's even. I also like to pop the eyes out to make sure that they're fairly even as well, and then sink them in and make sure as well. Just kind of play with it a little bit before fully committing, just to see and make sure your placement's correct. So now I'm going to get my washer on the back here. These washers are nice and tough. And then I'm going to do the other eye as well. There we go. So here's the eye placement, and your eyes, they're never going to be exactly perfect. Things aren't going to line up perfectly every time, so don't worry too much if it's a little off. Honestly, no one's going to notice, and it's probably just, you know, me and you who are going to notice. Let's just say that you place your eye and it's really far off, and maybe your rounds don't line up, because I've done that before plenty of times. I'm not afraid to admit it, that I put my eyes on all sorts of wonky sometimes, so you want to remove the washer off the back. Depending on how hard it was to get the washer on, it will be even harder to take it off. So for this, you need a pair of scissors, and I'm going to warn you, please be careful with this technique. If you aren't confident with it, please don't do it. I don't want you to hurt yourself, but I'm going to be using this pair of scissors, and what we're going to do is we're going to stick our scissors under the washer. And you just really want to be so careful to not cut the yarn or hurt yourself. So what I like to do is kind of fuss with it a little bit until I can get the scissors between the yarn and the washer. Because like I said, you don't want to cut your yarn, because that would be horrible. But what you're going to do is you're just going to gently push the washer up. Now, if you get to a point where you feel like you can't push it anymore, then what I like to do is actually cut the washer. And this step, you want to be very careful, just kind of cut the washer and not the yarn. And I usually do this by cutting over the top of it, because it'll be a lot harder to cut the yarn doing this way. And then when I got a little notch in it, I'm going to take my fingers, and what I'm going to do is kind of break it. Now, you might need to cut it some more as well, and sometimes just the little cut is enough to loosen it up entirely. But here it's not coming off anymore, so I'm going to gently stick my scissors in there. And cut that final seam. You see where I jerk the scissors up? That's my concern with this method of taking the washer off. So I wouldn't do this unless, like I said, you're confident with it and you're really careful with it. It is worth it once you get the eye off, because you can adjust the placement. Here we go. You see I finally broke that little bit on the end here. These were nice and thick and hard, so I got it off though. And now you can adjust your eye placement. As you can see, I didn't cut any yarn. I do have some fuzzies that came up, but none of the yarn was cut. Sometimes it's just worth it to leave the eye on though, so you have been warned. Don't use this technique unless you accept the risk that you might cut your yarn and you might have to start the project over. To this point, I have done that before at one point, and it definitely hurts. So the other thing is, obviously this washer is no longer usable. If you don't have backup washers, this might not work either, and you might just have to accept the fact that it's uneven. That is the technique for removing the washer that I use. That is how you add safety eyes to 2 different types of plushies. If there's another type that I'm maybe missing or forgetting about, let me know in the comments, and I'll probably do another one of these for safety eye placement. The other thing is you can use these techniques to place embroidered eyes, felt eyes, and things like that. If you want to embroider the eyes, for example, when you finish your jellyfish, then I still recommend sewing the eyes on opposite from your front/end of round because you'll get a much more even looking eye. And then if you have any seams on the back end from, for example, if you fastened off, then you won't be able to see it on the front. That is how I place safety eyes. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Stay tuned for the next few episodes because I'm going to be showing you how I reinforce limbs such as the ears, arms, and legs of Bailee specifically, but then I'll also be showing how to attach heads, and you can apply that technique to any plushie where you're attaching the head separately. And then I'll also be showing some stuffing techniques. So if you're excited for that, definitely subscribe if you haven't already. I appreciate each and every one of you so very much, and I will definitely see you in my next video. Bye!